Today's daf Yomi is Shevuos daf Lamed Hey Shevuos 35. Today's daf is dedicated for a Shemir for the Chayalim. That's all for the Shvuyim and Yeshua for Am Yisrael. This is Tzara. We're going to start at the Mishnah on the top of 35a. Mishnah tells us that in the scenario where a person says, Mashbi'ani Alechem, I'm making you take an oath in Wu Tavo v'tayuduni, that you have to come and testify. Sha'amar ish poni u'itein matayim zuz. This man promised me he's going to give me 200 zuz, and he hasn't given it. Now we're going to say these people are exempt from the Shevuos Ha'edus, from the oath of testimony, from the Karban Shvuah. Why? She'en chayavin el al tvias mamon kipadon. You're only liable for a Shevuos Ha'edus if there was a claim for money, like in the case of a deposit, because if they would have testified, Rashi says that they owed him the money, then they'd be liable. But this person, they aren't saying he owes them the money. He's just saying he said he's going to do it, but he could always just go back on that. Therefore, he's not liable for Karban Shua. But if he says, Mashbi'ani Alechem, make you take an oath, edus, second scenario, he says, I'd make you testify that when you know evidence, you will come and testify for me. Then we're going to say that under those circumstances, these people they are also exempt. Why? Because the oath, he says, I make you take an oath now that you will testify for me. So the oath is coming before the testimony, meaning to say he promises he will do it when he sees the evidence. So the oath is coming before the evidence. So therefore, under those circumstances, we're going to say he's exempt from the Karban Ha'edus. Let's say let's say he was standing in the synagogue of Amar and he says, Mashbi'ani Alechem. Let's say he's standing in the synagogue and he says, I make you take an oath. And we'll see the Gemara is going to explain the context who he's talking to. Shematem yodin li edus, that if you know testimony on my behalf, shetavo v'tayiduni, that you will come and testify. Areo peturin. And under those circumstances, we're going to say he is exempt. Under those circumstances, we're going to say he's going to be exempt because he didn't say it to any specific person. Amar l'shnayim, the next case, the fourth scenario. Amar l'shnayim, mashbi'ani alechem ish ploni uponi shematem yodin li edus shedivov v'tayiduni. Shevuos she'ein ani yodin cha'edus v'hem yodim lo edus mipi ed o sheyachem and karvel pasol harei peturin. Fourth scenario where they're exempt from a Shevuos Ha'edus. If he says, come and testify, and they say they don't know, but they do know, but they only know through hearsay, they heard, or else they know only because of but they're disqualified because they're a disqualified witness or a relative. Under these circumstances, we're going to say they're exempt. Shalch bi'ad avdo. Let's say he's shilach bi'ad avdo. Oh, welcome back, Jeff. Welcome back. Let's say he sent it through the hand of a servant. Oh, sha'amar lahan. Or he said to them, or sha'amar lahan anitba, or the person who said it to the witnesses was not the plaintiff, but the defendant. He says, Mashbi'ani alechem, shematem yodim lo edu shetavo v'toidu. He says, the defendant was the one who said it. And then under those circumstances, the defendant says, if you know testimony, you have to come and testify. And they're going to be exempt unless they hear it directly from the plaintiff himself. So now the Gemara tells us on 35a at basically a third of the way down, Tana Rabban, let's go through the Mishnah. Mashbi'ani alechem, I make you take an oath, and we'll tavo v'toiduni. Amar ish ploni l'teilim my time to this. Well, natan yachol yachayim tamalomar techatel gzeira shava. Nemarkan. Okay, I'm just going to read it and then I'll explain. Nemarkan techatev and nemarlan techatev. Alalam etvias mamon v'yeshlo afkam etvias mamon v'yeshlo. So this is the scenario the first scenario in the Mishnah, where he says, "I make you take an oath." This person said he owes me 200 zuz, and now he didn't give it. I might think that you're liable for a Karban Shua, we say you're not. So the only way you're liable, we learn from Gzera Shava, techata, that has to be like a pikadon. What's a pikadon? A pikadon is where there is a claim, an actual claim for money. But in this case, there's not an actual claim for money. In this case, he just promised him. He promised him, but that's not a claim for money. He said, I'm going to give you money. Well, guess what? He can go back on it. So therefore, that's not an actual claim for money. So therefore, under those circumstances, the carbon shua, the Shevuos edus does not apply. Second scenario, Tanarabanan, Mashbiani Chalechem, Tanarabanan Mashbiani Lechem, Kashatedui Edus Shatavo V'Tariduni. He says, come and testify for me that when you know evidence, you will testify. And I'm going to think you're liable. And he hears the sound of the oath. And then he's a witness, and he was a witness, or he saw, or he knew, which means the testimony, meaning the thing that he's testifying about, the evidence, that has to come prior to the oath. That's the only case where you're going to be liable for the korban shua. But not where the oath came before the testimony. Okay, so the third scenario is he stood in the synagogue. He says, I make you take an oath. And then we're going to say they're not liable because he didn't say it to anybody specific. He just said it to the congregation. So Amar Shmuel, Shmuel says, even if the witnesses are amongst them, still under those circumstances, they're not going to be liable for the korban shua. Pshita, it's obvious. That's exactly what the Mishnah says. Well, if the witnesses are not there, of course they're not going to be liable. What are we talking about? Obviously, they're only it's even though they're there, they're exempt. So the Gemara says, no, it's no, even if he's standing right next to them. He might have said, command the armor with them. Since he's standing right next to them, it's like he specified them. Kamashwan would say, no, that's not the case. And so too we say, Ra Siya Shalbanea. Then let's say he saw a group of people. He saw a whole chabura. He saw a group of people. Omdin va'eda b'neim, and there were witnesses who were standing amongst them. He says, I make you take an oath. They should come and testify. And I might think they're liable. It says, he hasn't specified them. Maybe if he says anybody who's here should come and testify. He has to specify the witnesses. So let's say he says it, and then they don't know because they have hearsay or their relatives who say that they don't bring the korban shua. He says, you come and testify. They only know through hearsay. So one of them was disqualified. I think they're liable. It says if he will not be magid is testify, then he'll bear his sin. The verse is only referring to those people who are capable of giving testimony. Let's say he sends it in the hand of his servant. Let's say the message is brought by his servant. Or the defendant is the one who said, I might think he's liable. So the Gemara says, well, how does that verse relate to this idea that you can't do it through your servant or anybody else, or through the defendant? My Talmud. So how do you derive it? So Amar Rabbi Elazar, im lo yagid ksiv. It says the word lo, not lamed aleph, but spells it lamed vav aleph, meaning im lo yagid vinasavano. If to him directly, if to the plaintiff, the witness doesn't say the testimony, then he bears his sin. But if to somebody else he doesn't say it, then we're going to say Potter, he's exempt. Why does it say specifically, commentators discuss, why does it say specifically of the slave? Because it means the slave is not able to be his agent there. But if he appoints like a lawyer, or Shah, then it would be able to make the person liable for korban shua. Now we go to the next Mishnah. Mashbiani alechem. Let's say he says the language of I make you take an oath. Mitzvah ani alechem, or I command you to take an oath. Osrechem ani, that's also language of an oath. Hareu chayav. And then all these cases, he's going to be uh, um, he's also going to be liable under those circumstances to bring the carbon shavua. But if he says b'shamayim u'va'aretz, if he says by heaven and earth, well, that's not the expression of an oath. Hareo Peturin, then they're going to be exempt. But Aleph Daled, let's say he uses the name that's written Aleph Daled, then Nun Yud, which is one of the names of God, or B'Yud Hey, or this is the name that's Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, the Shem Havaya it's called, or B'Shakai B'Tzvakos, B'Chanon B'Rachom, B'Erach Hapayim B'Rav Chesed. These are all what's called the Kinuyim. These are called the associated names of God. Hareo Chayavin. Then he's going to be liable. If he uses that language in the oath, he's going to be liable. There's a fundamental dispute between Rashi and the other commentaries, and some of the other commentaries, as to what is the exact language formulation of the oath. Rashi's of the expression that you use this language of the oath, and at the end of it, you say the name of God. But not all the commentaries require the name of God as part of the oath. That's a fundamental dispute. So there's not general consensus about what exactly is the language that's necessary. But here we're talking about whether or not this name of God is used, or the associated name of God is used as part of the oath, then you're going to be liable. But if it's not, you're not. Hamakal b'kulan. Let's say one curses Rahman al Hashem's name with using the name of God, then you're liable. Chayav, Divrei and Meir, with even with the kino, even with the associated name. Chamim Potrin. Chamim say you're going to be. The Chamim say you're going to be exempt if it's with the associated name of God. They're only going to say you're liable only if you use the actual name of God. If you curse one's father or mother with this, even with the kinoi and even with the associated the names of God, you're liable. The Chum say you're exempt. If you curse yourself or your colleague with any of these names, even the associated, the violation of a prohibition. Yakacha Hashem Elokim, v'chein Yakaka Elokim. If you say the following, that God should strike you, or Yakacha Elohim, this is Zui Oah Ksuva b'Torah. This is the Oah, the oath that's written in the Torah. What's going on here? Rashi says that if he said to the witnesses one of the verses of the curses that are listed in the Torah, Yakacha Hashem Meshachefes, if you don't testify, or he says Yakacha Hashem, or he says he's reading the curses to the Torah and he says to one of the witnesses, God should strike you down if you won't testify for me. This is the Oah that's written in the Torah, and therefore they're in violation. Al Yakacha V'Varacha. He says God should not curse you, he should bless you. Rameir says you're mechayev. That Rameir says that since you're saying he shouldn't do it, then we say if you do it, then these things will happen to you. And if you don't, meaning to say, if you testify for me, this will not happen to you. But if you don't testify for me, then this should happen to you. So Rameir says that you're liable there because Mikal Avat Hashem Chum say you're poter. Chum exempt you. Yes.
In the Mishnah, it seems like someone can bind somebody else without that other person saying witness.
No, we learned already in the Gemara. We learned already in our chapter that no, it only works if the person says Amen. So
Not say it.
We said it earlier, and we'll say it in tomorrow's daf also. So Mashbiani Aleichem, I make you take an oath. Micah Amar. What's he saying to him to make you liable? So Amar Rav Yehuda Achikamer. This is what he's saying. Mashbiani Alechem Mishvu Hamura b'Torah. Make you take an oath by the oath that's listed in the Torah. Mitzaveh Alechem. I command you b'tzavah Hamura b'Torah. Or I command you by the commands that are written in the Torah. Or Osrachem Ani b'Isra Hamura b'Torah. I bind you by an oath by the oath that's written in the Torah. In all these cases, if he says if he repeats it or he says Amen, he's going to be liable. Amarle Abaye says, "Oh, other Tani Rebbe Chia, Kovalchem ani Areu Chayavim." Well, what about if he uses an expression? Didn't we learn that if he says, Rebbe Chia taught in the Brides, if he says Kovalchem ani, which is an expression of binding by oath, you're liable. Koval Baraisa Miksiv. Koval is not written in the Torah. So therefore, that can't be that that's what's going on, because Kovalchem is not in the Torah. So therefore, Elam Rabbiya Hachikamer, this is what it means. Mashpiani Elechem B'Shvua. I bind you by an oath. Mitzvah ani Elechem B'Shvua. Or Osrarchem ani B'Shvua, or Kobalchem ani B'Shvua. And this is Rashi's approach. Rashi explains, Ma'askiras Hashem be'echad mikol Lashonos Haloli. He says, Mashpiani Elechem, by the name of God. He has to mention the name of God. That's Rashi's approach. But the other commentaries do not agree with them, and he mentions the name. That's what Rashi says. Meaning to say that he says, take the oath. He says, take the oath. Mashpiani Elchem B'Shvua. It doesn't say Mashpiani Elchem B'Shvua. It says Mashpiani Elchem B'Shem. I make you take the oath by the name of God. But not everybody accepts that approach. And indeed, many don't. And that's the approach of Rashi here. Okay, so let's say he uses the name of Aleph Dalid or Yud Hey or Shakai Tzvakos Chanun V'Racham Erachpayim Rav Chesed. Then all these cases he's liable. I mean to say Lamemer the Chanun V'Racham Shemos Ninu that the Chanun and Racham are names of God. V'Raminu, didn't we learn? This is laws of Saphros, that there are names of God that you are not allowed to erase. There are names of God that can be erased, and there are names that are not able to be erased. These are the names of God that you can't erase. What are they? Could go in Kel, Elokecha, Elokim, Elokechem, and then also it says when Moshe says to Hashem, "What's your name?" It says basically Eke Asher Eke, and then Aleph Dalid. This is the name of Anus, and Yud Hey, that's a Shem Havaya, and Shakai and Tzvakos, Areo and and all these names cannot be erased. Avol Agadol Agibor Vanora, Adir Rav Chazak Va'amitz Va'azos Chanan V'Racham Erachapayim Rav Chased Areo and Nimchakin. So Chanan and V'Racham can be erased. So why do you say that it's a binding oath? So Rabbi Masnisim V'Mishu Chanan. So says Abaye. Top now of page 35b, our Mishnah is referring to where you said, I'm swearing by the name of the one who is Chanun, the one who is compassionate, B'mishu Racham Kamar, the one who is merciful. Rava says, if that's the case, B'shamayim v'aretz nami. Well, then if he says, I'm swearing by the one who created the heaven and or the one who has the heaven and the earth, it should also be B'mishamayim v'aretz shelo kamar. It should be the one who has heaven and earth, and he should be responsible. So Gemara says, you think these two things are the same? Hasam, in that case, Kivan Deleka Midiafrine, the Ikre Racham V'Chanun, since in that case, with respect to God, there's nothing else that's called Racham and Chanun, compassionate and merciful. It's obviously reference to God. It's clearly referring to God. But by heaven and earth, there is a heaven and earth. But Shemayim v'aretz kamar. Maybe he's just swearing by heaven and earth, not necessarily by God. Tan Rabbanan Kasav Aleph Lamed Me Elokim. So now we're learning about, let's say you write the name of God, but you only wrote the first two letters of Elokim, Aleph Lamed, or the Yud Hey from the Shem Havaya, the Yud and Hey from the Shem Havaya. Harei Zeino Nimchak. That cannot be erased. Because those are names of God in and of themselves, the Kel and Ka. But let's say you write Shindal and Mishakai or Aleph Dal and Anai or Tzadi Beis Mi Tzvakos Harei Nimchak. Those two letters at the beginning of those other names of God are not actual names of God, and so therefore they can be erased. Rabbi Yossi Omer Tzvakos Kul Nimchak. Rabbi Yossi says the name Tzvakos can totally be erased. Shalom Nikra Tzvakos El Al Shem Yisrael. Because why is God called? Why is the name Tzvakos appear? Because he's the God of Israel. It says the Hotzesis Tzivosai and Sami b'nei Israel. Because it says, meaning to say it's not a reference to God. The word Tzvakos means the Jewish people. It says I brought out my Tzivosai. my legions, my people, the Bnei Yisrael, my Eretz Mitzrayim. So tzivakos can be erased according to Rabbi Yossi. And Amar Shmuel ain't halachak Rabbi Yossi. Shmuel says the law is not like Rabbi Yossi, but tzivakos is a name that can't be erased. There are other gersos that Shmuel says the law is like Rabbi Yossi, and so therefore it says that it can be erased. So Chora, those who write like the name of God, like Tzivos Hashem, they paskin like the other girsa that the name of Shmuel, that Shmuel says that we paskin that it can be erased. Tana Rabbanon, kol atafel Hashem, anything that is a prefix or a suffix to the name of God, whether before or afterwards, erase and nimcha, then it can be erased. Lefanav Kate. What's an example of a prefix to the name of God? Let's say La Hashem, and the Lam and nimcha, the Lam could be erased. The Ba Hashem, the Beis nimcha, the Beis could be erased. Va Hashem, the Vav could be erased. Vav nimcha. Me Hashem, Mem nimcha. Sha Hashem, Shin nimcha. He Hashem, He nimcha. Cha Hashem, Chaf nimcha. So all those cases where it's a prefix before God's name, it can be erased. But la'acharav Kate, what does it mean when it says it's afterwards and it can be erased? Elokei nu. The nu is the nimchak. Elokeihem, the hem is nimchak. Elokeichem, the chem is nimchak. So according to this first approach, any prefix or suffix of the name of God can be erased. Acherim omrim, no. La'acharav eno nimchak. After the name of God, it cannot be erased. Shekfar Kitshu Hashem, because it was already consecrated. And Amrafuna Alocha Kacherem, there was like a Kacherem, and that's how we paskin. Anything that comes after the name is attached to the name, that cannot be erased. But anything that comes before, we could erase. So, Kol Shemos Amurim B'Torah. So now the Gemara is going to give a couple of citations from places in the Torah where there's names which can be ambiguous, and they tell us whether these names are Kodesh or they can be erased. So Kol Shemos Amurim B'Torah Ba'Avram Kodesh. Any name that's written by Abraham is holy. Anytime you say the name of Anus is holy. Chutz Mizeh Shu Chol, with the exception of Vayomer Adoshem Im Nama Tzasichei Meinecha. When Avram turns and he says, Al Na Tavor Me'al Avdecha, wait here. So who is that a reference to? So they say that that's a reference to, he's not speaking to God there, he's speaking to the travelers. Chanina ben Achi, Rabbi Shua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Hashem Rabbi Elazar ben Amodeo, Amar Avzek Kodesh. No, there he's speaking to God. He's saying to God, you wait while I go attend to these travelers. Kaman Azla, Hada Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Rav Gedol, Achnas Asorchan, Yoser Mekol Explanation. Now, like whom is it like where it says that greeting guests is greater than even greeting God? Kaman also is like that opinion, because it says that he says to God, you wait here, I have to go get my guests. Kol Shemos, so hospitality is greater than meeting with God. Kol Shemos Amur and Belot, all the names that are mentioned by Lot are Chol, are not holy. Chutz Mizeh Shu Kodesh, with the exception of the following name, which is holy, as it says, Vayomer Lot Alehem. Lot says to them, Al Na Adonai. Please, Al Na Hadoshem, Hinei Na Matzav D'Chachem Einecha. So that's a reference to God, because he says, please, because Lot is saying, have compassion on us. I can't make it to the mountains. So he was not referring to the angels there, but he was referring to Amishi HBR. He was referring to God. Kol Shemeros Amur and Benavos. All the names that are mentioned by Navos in the first book of Kings in chapter 21, verse 10, when the false witnesses testified that Navos cursed God in order to kill him, all those names are Kodesh, are holy, but by Pasal Micha, all those names are holy. They are not holy. You have to look at the context there. Rabbi Eliezer Omar ben Navos Kodesh, b'Micha yesh ben chol yesh ben Kodesh. Rabbi Eliezer says by Micha there are some holy and some Kodesh. Aleph Lamed, when the names that start with Aleph Lamed, they are chol, they're not holy. But Yud Hey, but the names that start with Yud Hey, they are Kodesh. Chutz Mizeh, with the exception of the following, She'alef Lamed Hu Kodesh. And that's where it states by Pesach Micha, Yemei Hayos Beisa Elokim B'Shilo. So that's a holy name because it refers to the house of God in Shiloh. Kol Shemos Hamurim Begivas B'Yamin. At the end of the book of Judges, we have the story of Pilagish Begiva. All those names, Rabbi Eliezer says they are Kol. Rabbi Yeshua says they're Kodesh. So Amar Rabbi Eliezer, Mechim Avtiach Ve'Emos. Rabbi Eliezer is obviously not Kodesh because in the God says go out to war and they're not successful. Amar Rabbi Yeshua, no, Ma'ashavtiach Hasa. He said go out to war. He didn't say you'd be victorious. So what he promised, he did. They're the ones, it's their fault. They didn't look to see if they'll be victorious or not. But in the end, when they looked, God agreed to them. Kol Shlomo Hamurim B'Shir Hashirim Kodesh. Anytime it says Shlomo in the Song of Songs, it's a holy name. Because what we're basically saying is Shir L'Misha Shalom Shalom. Sing to the one to peace belongs to. Chutz mizeh, with the exception of this verse, which is Chol Karmi Shali Lefanai Ha'elaf L'cha Shlomo. And this is my vineyard is before me. Ha'elaf L'cha Shlomo. And what is the vineyard of God? That's the children of Israel. And the Shekhinah says that because the Jewish people, for every 1,000 men that Shlomo what he did, that Shlomo takes for himself, there remain 200 to guard his vineyard, 200 to study Torah. Those are the ones who guard the vineyard, and those are the Rabbanim. The Eishomim, some say Av Zechol, that's also not holy. Hinei Mitaso, that this one is also not holy. Hinei Mitaso Shel Shlomo Shishim, that Shlomo's bed was surrounded by 60 men. Av Zeh V'Omi Bayhach, meaning to say Av Zeh implies that some say that they also agree that the first one is also chol, that both are chol. A kingdom that kills 1/6 of its people, 1/6 that go out to war is not punished. That there are 1,000 that go to serve in heaven. And then there are 200 that guard his vineyard. That's the earth. And so therefore we see that only 1/6 can go out to battle. And from this verse, Shmuel learns that only 1/6 can serve the 1/6 are not going to heaven. 1/6 are serving the army. We see that Shlomo that said in this verse is a reference to God, that 1,000 will serve God. And if we say that both of these verses are whole, then it doesn't make sense. So how could Shmuel be saying that? So Gemara says Shmuel has a third opinion there. Ironically, Shmuel is arguing with the Brisa here. That Shmuel says that this verse is holy, and that's not like either one. So the Gemara says, so this is what the Brisa means. The Brisa is saying Shlomo is chol, the Yesh Omrim Zeh Kodesh, V'zeh chol. And some say the opposite. Some say that the second pasuk is chol and the first one is kodesh. Demitaso, Shmuel Amar Ki Yesh Omrim. Shmuel holds like the Yesh Omrim, like the second opinion. Kol Machai Amurim B'Daniel. All the any place where it mentions a king in the book of Daniel, it is chol. With the exception of with the exception of one verse that is holy. And what is this verse? Where Daniel says, Ant Malka Melch Machaya Di'ela Shmaya Malchusa Chisna V'Sakfa V'Yikar Yavlach. You, Nebuchadnezzar, the king, you, Nebuchadnezzar, are king, but the King of Kings is the God of heaven. And that's the one who provides and is glorious. And so this verse is a reference to God. Some say Av Zeh Kodesh, that also this verse that says when Daniel came to explain the bad dream from Nebuchadnezzar, it says Mari Chalmo Sanacha Pishrei Arach. My master, the dream will be for your enemies and the solution for your enemies. The man Kamar, who is Daniel calling Mari? Isa Nebuchadnezzar. If he's speaking to Nebuchadnezzar, who are the enemies of Nebuchadnezzar? Yisrael. Milat Kolayat Yisrael. Is he cursing Israel? So therefore, It must be it's the enemies of God, and therefore the Murray is referring to God. Tanakama Savar, no, he has other enemies other than the Jewish people. Soni Israel, Ika, Soni Avdei Chavim, Laika, does he only have the enemies of the Jewish people? He doesn't have any other enemies. And so, okay, so I just want to, we'll stop the recording here, but I want to say the schedule. Okay.